Hey, welcome to Thru Port Collective. Glad to see everybody here tonight. To start, we just wanted to thank all the new people that have come, and we've popped over 100 subscribers, which is good for us. We're just a baby little show, and wanted to welcome everyone here. We don't usually give a whole spiel or anything most weeks, but being that we've had a lot of new subscribers and it's a new year, we'll just want to say, like, what is the purpose of this show of Thru Port Collective, and where does the name come from? And we really formed the show with the idea that we wanted it to be for helping musicians, like to help each other out, and that's where we get this idea. Thru Port Collective, which of course comes from MIDI terminology, and having a through port, set of MIDI ports, you're taking in information and you're also passing it along, and that's kind of the idea of our show. That it's not just something where we sit around and drool over new gear, although we do a little of that too. We're really trying to figure out how we can do what we do better. And so this is a show for all instruments. We have a big focus on recording and performance, as well as synthesizers of what brought the three of us together. And of course, that's what we're talking about tonight. But Tim's also a drummer. I'm a guitarist, bassist, and we all do a little something. So welcome tonight. Also, if you are not joined already, we have a Facebook group, Thru Port Collective, and we talk about stuff during the week, and people are welcome to post, and we just try to help one another out. So it's a good place to kind of connect with other musicians. So, and speaking of places to connect with other musicians, just two that I want to mention real quick. One of our sister shows is Ranzi. Ranzi is a really cool guy from Perth, Australia. Does a show on Sunday. Well, it'd be Sunday mornings for me, or Saturday morning, very early for me, and does a lot of different topics on that show, from setting up modular synthesis to gear news and everything else. And we always encourage people to go check out that show. And then one of our other buddies, Dominic Hawken, which is Mr. Wiggly, is unfortunately down for a little bit, has been feeling a little bit sick, so his show's been put on hold if you haven't seen the announcement. But we want to wish Dom good tidings and hope that you get to feeling better with whatever you're dealing with. So hang in there. We're looking forward to you coming back. So, well, you guys, how have you been? Marshall, what's up, man?
What's up, guys? Not much. I've actually kind of taken a little bit of a break from music here lately, in terms of working on my live production. But I plan to get back on that this weekend. So sometimes you get a lot of work done and you need a little bit of a breather, and that's kind of what I've been doing. So focusing on some other projects.
Nice. How about you, Tim?
So let's see, mostly working on, my live set that's been my focus for about 7 or 8 weeks now. So my solo set that I've been doing, that I have a new rig for, and then I have a show coming up next week with my band, and then so kind of getting set up for that and learning this batch of new songs that we wrote during the shutdown, during pandemic. So we wrote a bunch of songs and we'd never played them. It's just the way it went. So
time to let them out.
Yeah, it's time to kind of let them out there, and time for me to learn them. So I'm just kind of doing some sound design and system configuration, and learning notes, basically figuring out how to play these parts. And that's been my last 8 weeks pretty much. We had a rehearsal last night with the band, so I just got my rig set back up this afternoon.
Perfect time that we're talking about it too. all the new rig setup will be. We can get to that a little bit later. So, band is called the Pin Jones Conspiracy.
Yeah, the Pin Jones Conspiracy, and it's just a trio. It's a vocalist who plays on some songs acoustic guitar. He also played floor tom on some things on our last record. And but he's a great vocalist. And then there's Ben Jackson is a drummer. Benjamin Olson is our vocalist, and then myself covering pretty much all the musical parts, other than vocals and drums.
Yeah. And we had Ben Jackson on the show, which was a great episode. If people want to check it out, it's up there. And Paul says, world domination, one patch cable at a time, of course.
Of course.
So, that's right. You will be assimilated by the Thru Port Collective.
It's good to see you, Paul. We haven't you hadn't been around, it seems like maybe the last couple episodes, so it's good to see you.
Now cowbell for your vocalist, Tim, he says.
Oh, I need it could happen. We were talking about anvil last night. Maybe he should play an anvil.
As one should. I mean, there's that whole thing about
There we go.
What's his face? Mal Evans playing the anvil on Maxwell's Silver Hammer on the Let It Be documentary.
Oh, yeah.
This like monster guy just banging an anvil.
It's amazing.
So, well, we have a show that's like primarily dedicated to synthesizers this week anyway. But we want to begin with a little bit of news, sad news, actually. And let me pull this up here at the stream. One of the greats, one of the greatest guitarists of all time has passed away today only at the age of 78, and that's guitarist Jeff Beck. And if you're not familiar with him, Jeff Beck probably came to light with the Yardbirds, which was one of the great rock bands of the mid-'60s, British bands. The guitarist before Jeff Beck in the Yardbirds was Eric Clapton, and the guitarist afterwards was Jimmy Page of Led Zeppelin. And so I talk about one band with three really epic guitar players. And, Jeff Beck, I think it'd be somebody that maybe people wouldn't really recognize the name, but guitarists in particular are just, regard him as just one of the most amazing guitar players. And I remember discovering him myself in the mid or late 90s. Like I started getting his albums and was just blown away. Like his technique and the way that he did things is a bit unusual, but he's got such a nuance to his playing that is absolutely fantastic. I know you've listened to a lot of Jeff Beck as well, Tim.
Oh yeah, sure. I mean, when I was 14 is when that I think his first big acclaimed record, "Blow by Blow," was the title. Mm-hmm. That's when that came out. It was in '74. So. Yeah, man, like I used to sit around and spin that on my stereo turned up loud and play drums to it, and that record and the Wired record, were kind of just like, they were just mainstays for a long time. I used to listen to a lot of that kind of fusion music anyway when I was a kid. So, and yeah, I mean, what an amazing and versatile guitar player too. Like, he plays this solo on one of the Stevie Wonder songs, "Looking for Another Pure Love." It's on Talking Book, and he plays a beautiful solo on that. And Stevie's kind of on mic going, "Yeah, do it, Jeff. Yeah," while he's playing. It's really cool, man. It's so great. But yeah, he definitely has a big part of my, musical journey.
So I guess, if we were to kind of describe his style, like in the 60s, he got started with the Yardbirds, which was very much blues rock, like just as things are starting to get heavy and psychedelic, fuzz guitar and things like that. His first album, Truth, I love. And it was really trippy when I got that album because I'd been listening to Led Zeppelin a ton before that. And Truth came out, and I think 1968, and Led Zeppelin 1, I believe, and Led Zeppelin 1 and 2, I think, were 1969. And when I heard Truth, it was so trippy because I'd been listening to Led Zeppelin 1 a lot, and it was an album that's definitely got that sound, and it came out actually before it. And of course, Page and Beck were really good friends, and so you can see that there was a lot of the same influences. In fact, they covered one of the same songs. Which one was it? You Shook Me, I think. But one of the trippy things with that album was it had Ronnie Wood, who's a Rolling Stones guitarist, playing bass, and also just lost my train of thought. And on vocals, somebody I never expected to hear on a heavy rock blues album, that was Rod Stewart. And so kind of growing up, Rod Stewart was something that, older women would fawn over and played stuff that would be on the easy listening radio stations. And here's Rod Stewart, like if you can imagine Rod Stewart singing on Led Zeppelin 1 or something, that's basically what it is. And it works really well. It's kind of sad he didn't stick in the kind of heavier rock type of stuff. But
well, did you ever hear him in the group Faces?
Oh yeah. I haven't heard Faces in a long time.
Yeah. But so that's kind of more that raw thing that you're talking about. That's where he came from, and then some producer got hold of him and made him all homogenized. I'm sure, got him a nice haircut.
Was it Mick Ronson that was in the Faces as a guitarist?
I think so.
I can't remember.
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
Anyway, those guys all knew each other and played in each other's bands. Of course, maybe a little more relevant to our show, he did a lot of work in the mid to late 70s with Jan Hammer, which is just some really incredible stuff. In fact, I think Jan was on Wired, if I recall. Mm-hmm. But anyways, just, for those of us that, grew up with Jeff Beck and in his work, it's just really sad to see that he's gone. And especially, he wasn't 90 or 5 years old. He was only 78, still had a lot of time left. So anyways, something to check out. Robert in the chat just mentioned Because We Ended as Lovers, which is personally my favorite Jeff Beck song, but stuff like Freeway Jam is incredible prog rock, and Scatterbrain and things like that. Really incredible work. So he will be missed.
For sure.
Well, so on to our topic, I guess. Let's just kind of dive into this. So we're talking synth rig setups and or live synth rig setups to be specific. And here's an area where like I've played a little bit of synth live, but it's always been on other people's stuff. Like that was like a secondary thing. And I've always been either a live guitarist or a live bassist. And so this is where it's great to have the two of you who, Marshall does live, is working on live stuff with, from the setups that you have here at home. And Tim has been going out and doing live performances and clubs and things in the Nashville area. So how do you guys want to start? Do we want to... I don't know, like what was the impetus to take your synth rig and make it into something that's a live rig instead of just a recording rig? What was it about it, the motivation that got you to do that?
Marshall, I'd love to hear you jump in on this.
It's actually been something I've wanted to do almost ever since I got into making electronic music, was to be able to do it live, because when I started, it was early 2000s. Everyone wanted to be a DJ. And I was like, I want to be the one that makes the music, but I don't want to also just play a bunch of other people's records. Like I always kind of wanted to be able to perform all this stuff live. And it's really complicated because there's so much variation in some of the styles that are played and tracks and everything. And that's why a DJ is nice, because they can change it up really quick, right? Mm-hmm. So earlier... Like I don't think it's really been possible until recently to be able to kind of do what I had in my mind this whole time. And so I've been slowly working on this for years.
That's really cool, though. You're at a point.
Yeah, it's exciting.
It's amazing. What's the big difference? Like what technology has popped up that's made it like possible for you to do?
The first thing was the push. The push controller. It occurred to me that using Ableton and using the push, or any kind of similar launch controller, really is a big game changer because you can automate a lot of things within Ableton in real time that way, and get kind of a performance-esque style out of some of this stuff. Whereas sometimes the DAW-less stuff, we're kind of talking about this in the pre-show a little bit. Sometimes the DAW-less stuff gets a little stale. It's a little more difficult to get the flexibility you might want. And when you have a tool like Ableton and combine it with a push, it kind of opens the door a lot more, I think, for what's possible. And I can't remember when the push came out, like 2015, somewhere around there, or maybe even earlier. But I think that's one of the greatest innovations to come out of the whole controller scene, because everyone's tried to make all these weird controllers and everything, and aside from an actual keyboard with actual pitch mod wheels, by the way, that's important, and the push controller, I think those things are invaluable to be able to do the kind of complexity that I'm interested in.
I'm going to pull this up so people can see what we're talking about here. So, let's see here. Close. So something like this, right?
Yep, that's the push 2. I'm still rocking the push 1. I got 3 of them.
Rocking it.
Yeah, and these are cool. Like, they've advanced quite a bit to where you kind of don't even need to look at the computer, which is cool.
Mm-hmm. That's the best. Yeah.
Yeah. So mine, you still need to work with the computer, like you need a screen, but you can do almost everything, I think, on these newer ones without looking.
So for someone like me, this is totally not my world, and I have an idea about what this does. But can you describe how you use it in your setup? What is this doing for you? What's its purpose?
Yeah.
So in Ableton, I can switch over actually to a screen here. This is remoted into my Miko, which is in.
Okay.
It's the main system for the live rig. Now in Ableton here, you have clips, and you see there's a red outline here. That is actually my push. Now, even though this push is in front of me, there's another one in the other room, but I've got some fancy USB over network stuff to where I can kind of control this. But you can see I can kind of scroll through this, and the section that's in the red box is actually what is shown on the push itself. And what I like to do is I create, because I come from old school trackers. That's kind of how I started. So I like to make things in clips, basically, and progress down through the track using the scenes. So what I like to do is kind of create all the different little loops, basically. The patterns are going to be used within a 8-bar or 16-bar pattern, and then trigger them in sequence as a full-on scene. And in my live rig, it's a little bit different here because really the only audio that's being sequenced in Ableton is the percussion, like the kicks and stuff. Like if I come in here, you can see there's MIDI down here for this. I think this is a kick with a bunch of reverb on it. This was going to be a separate thing that I haven't finished yet. And then the percussion stuff is all grouped together. So like snares and crashes, hi-hats, everything like that. So I'm kind of using Ableton right now mostly for audio processing and MIDI sequencing for the actual percussion. But all the other sequencing is done externally, and we'll talk about that when we get to it. But I like to kind of go through and trigger these. And what I found is actually to get my setup to work the way I wanted, I have to actually use both my hands to play, which is important. Mm-hmm. And so I don't have another hand to trigger stuff at certain points on a push. So I have one of these. I'll grab it because it's in here. It's the Morningstar MC6, which is a USB pedal that's programmable, and I've got this programmed to change certain aspects of Ableton. You see I've got a launch button, a play button, scrolling up and down. And this kind of acts as a rudimentary push that I can do things with my foot when my hands are tied up.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
How do you tell it, like, which scenes to go to or whatever? I mean, can you see that on the screen?
Yeah, so if I'm over here, and I kind of have these labeled on the master output here. So like this is the start, just so I know break 1, here's the end of the first track. I need to actually have the master selected. And then if I actually, this is going to play some sound. If I actually trigger it, I just triggered with my foot, it starts it off, right? And it's a macro that triggers and then moves it down to the next step. And then I can do the next one. And I can, if I need to, I can stop. I can scroll down with, this is all with my foot here. Scroll down, scroll up, start over again. So that's kind of how I use it. The macros are important because it's a chain of events where it actually is like hitting the enter key on the keyboard and then like pushing the down arrow to go down to the next scene. But it's not app specific, so you have to actually have what you want to like it'll execute that macro on anything that's selected, if that makes sense.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I have to make sure I'm on the right spot on the screen to make that operate correctly.
So that gets a little tricky, yeah.
Yeah.
To kind of zoom out here for a second, so we've got people that are pro musicians watching. We've got people that are more starting out, and so for the latter, like what you're doing with this, if I understand it correctly, is that you've got MIDI sequences set up. You're cycling through those things and engaging them, or multiple things at once, which are then sending MIDI out to your synthesizers to play.
Well, so the synthesizers are controlled completely differently. Traditionally, if you were going to do something like this, you didn't have this main piece of equipment that I have called the Blue Arp DM. You could do this all kind of in Ableton, if that makes sense. You can make all these different scenes, and you can have certain sections that you can play. It take a little bit different thought process and overall setup, but it's still possible to do very similar things with Ableton itself.
So, I mean, is this primarily triggering hardware, drum machines, synthesizers, or is the stuff that you're doing in Ableton all within Ableton, like sounds and sequencing and all that?
So I'm using Ableton as an audio mixer and processor. So even though, and I we might want to play that little video that I sent you there, Cryss, if we can. But basically, within each one of these sections, I'm only, you see I've got the audio inputs here for the JP8000. There's some stuff here, but this is all controlling different aspects of the synth. This is a filter cutoff that runs back to the Blue Arp, and there's some CC translation that goes back out again, then to the JP8000, because none of the instruments are actually connected to the computer directly. They're connected to this Blue Arp, which is kind of the main brain. And it's an arpeggiator that has patterns built into it. And actually, I've got an interface here for this, which might help explain this a little bit better. So this here is like the JP8000. Right now, this is set up as a dummy through. So like it's just going to play like a regular note, like on a keyboard directly. But then if you come over to like this is a chord pattern for the V synth, and I can actually probably play. Let me get to a different section of this. So you can hear it. That's the V synth. And then so this basically, I'm able to control all 8 of these instances of these different patterns that are all kind of connected to different instruments all at the same time. So I've got a full orchestra kind of coming through in terms of synths, all connected to a Behringer 18 mixer, but it's acting as an audio interface in Ableton. And so the audio comes into Ableton, and then I have these groups, which I also set up my chain for processing. So like an EQ, there's some delay in this one, some compression, things like that. So that way I get out of the master output, also got some ozone on here. I get a nice professional sounding mix at the same time that it's all live, if that makes sense.
So I realize I'm jumping the the flow of things here. Because of Ableton and because of all the processing that you're able to do with it, do you have need then of any sort of external mixer, or are you just summing everything in and into your audio interface?
So the Behringer XR18 actually is a mixer, but it's also can be used as an audio interface. It can do either one, but I'm using it as an audio interface, and basically Ableton is the mixer.
Okay. All right, let me pull up that video.
Sure.
All right, so here we go.
How's it going, everyone? Quick update on the live rig. I'm going to give a quick overview. This is the Blue Arb DM. All the synths are plugged in here. I've got 4 MIDI DIN inputs, and I've got a MIDI splitter down here. And so I can have, right now I have 8 total instruments connected. I've got inputs here. One of these comes from the Miko over here. Down through here, this is what gives me remote control over the rig from the other studio. This input here is for the beat step, and I need to recall this. And these are mapped to each one of the 8 instances within Blue Arb. And then here I've got it on the page here for all the automation. These are MIDI CCs that are mapped and converted. So I can control things like filter cutoff or different parameters on the synth. And so this is basically what makes everything work. This is connected to here over the USB connection. So, I mean, lots of flexibility. It also has 1/4-inch inputs on the side here for CV. I'm not using any modular stuff or anything like that, or triggering anything with voltage control, so I'm not using any of that. Got the push here. That's also connected to the Miko. So this and this are the main bits. I play here, it triggers the ARPs in Blue Arb, which then runs all the different synths. So that's how that works. Audio is connected up to the Behringer XR18 as a USB interface into the Miko, and that's pretty much it. I've got some other stuff going on here for this LED screen, which is not powered up at the moment, but it doesn't really matter, and I'm doing some work on some lighting. But that's it.
Yeah, and actually I said inputs for those first 4 that the synths are connected to. Those are actually, I think I called them inputs, but they're outputs. They're actually, all they do is send MIDI out. And then one of those, I think it was like port B, is connected to that MIDI through box, which then allows me to connect, I think, 5 more instruments with MIDI DIN if I want to do that. Right now there's 8 total instruments connected in there, basically. So the majority of the setup is live hardware. The percussion is all done in Ableton using either samples or a couple plugins. Like I've got the Kick 2 plugin that I like to make kicks with, because you can customize kind of what your kicks sound like. And then I've got an FM bass synth that I'm using as well. That is the, I can't remember what the name of it is, Op 7, I think.
Oh yeah, the DX7 one.
Yeah, it's like a DX7 clone. Sounds really good.
So this is like a pretty technical setup.
Yeah, it's really advanced, and that's why it's taken a long time, right? There's a lot of moving parts here to make all this do this. It's kind of like, if you think about, like, if you got like a Phantom or one of those other like fancy workstations, they kind of do the same thing, but all in one box, and you're kind of restricted to what you can use. But you can set up multi-tracks, and kind of perform with one of those. This is kind of like that, but like broken out to where I can use any equipment that I want,
Mm-hmm.
It does seem to like balance both freedom and control.
Yeah.
Like it seems on the front end, it's a lot of control. Like you're doing a lot of work to do all the routing, do all the setup, and then in the moment of performance, that's when you have the freedom to choose where you want to go and what you want to do.
Exactly, and that's the coolest thing about this is I'm not locked into a specific order or anything like that. I will have a standard run for like the track that I want to perform, right? But if I want to hold it on a different part or extend something, I can do that very easily this way, which is nice.
So a question about that, Marshall.
Mhm.
I think I'm sure, but I'm just asking anyway. Ableton allows you for the different scenes to like when you choose the next scene,
Mhm.
you can tell it to to play the end of that last scene before beginning the next one, right?
Well, so that's what it does. So when you trigger a scene, and then it will, depending on how you have it set up in Ableton, you can either have it loop or stop. Most of these scenes will loop so that it will just continuously run until I trigger the next scene.
Because I do kind of a similar thing with my live synth rig, my solo rig, but I'm using Machine Plus, and I found where you could go in and tell it when you want it to change. When you select, like if you select before a downbeat, you select the next scene. You can tell it to change on a quarter note, eighth note, 16th note, bar, or finish the scene. So
Yeah,
that's why I was asking, can you do that same kind of thing in Ableton? I'm sure.
Yeah, if we go, let me bring myself big here. Yeah, you see there's a setting up here for
There.
this here. This is it. So I
Okay.
usually trigger by the bar because I'm not as precise sometimes with when I'm gonna stomp on this thing or hit the push. So I like to leave it as each bar, but you can change this to different resolutions if you're better at.
There you go.
Yeah,
Okay, cool. Yeah, I was curious about that.
yeah.
Hey, well, one thing I wanted to mention too. So Dan mentioned this. The Blue ARP is available as a free plugin if anyone wants to play with it.
Exactly.
Um,
Yep.
I know you've used the plugin, and now you were part of the process of developing the hardware. I know you're friends with him.
Yeah, beta test. I
Beta-
didn't. I mean, he did the whole thing. I just helped him
Yeah,
kind
yeah.
of find bugs and things like that, and help try and get it stable, for use.
How much of this would be doable, being that you already have Ableton going? How much would be doable with the Blue ARP plugin for those that maybe don't have the money to buy the hardware of it?
Sure, you could do the whole thing with the plugin. The biggest limiting factor, there's two main reasons why I think that the hardware version is one of the coolest things ever. First of all, it is a huge pain to keep things in time. That's like one of the biggest issues with DAWs and things like that is trying to keep everything synced up. The more processing you do, the more stuff you add in, stuff kind of wants to get all wonky on you and things like that. That is a potential limitation doing it that way, but there's ways to kind of mitigate that. The other thing is with I'm trying to think. The other thing is the amount of hardware you want to connect. You need a way to get MIDI back into your instruments, and that either means hooking up USB dongles, or if it's a newer synth with a USB port, and then you got 8 of these plus your interface. You're gonna have a bunch of USB ports you're gonna need. You're not gonna be able to do that with like a laptop. You're gonna need an actual computer to take with you, or to build a setup like that.
Also, maybe one thing, because several people have commented about how impossibly hard it would be to take this entire rig out to a club or something. Tell us about your purpose, though, because I know you have a specific thing in mind for it.
Well, the idea is to be able to create a full set of music that I can perform live. And I would like to take this out and do it at venues. There may be some consolidation on the hardware side when that occurs. But it is possible to do. And you saw in that video there, I've got stuff kind of everywhere. It's not really cleaned up at the moment and optimized to be broken down and put back up quickly. But that's something that I intend to work on as well. And you look at guys like Kebu who do this, and I don't know if I'm pretty sure that's his full job. is going around and taking all his vintage gear, and his setup is probably just as complicated, if not more so in some ways than mine. And not to mention he's having to deal with the headache of 40-year-old analog synthesizers too. So
Yeah, I was going to say,
can be done. Never say never. So this is like I said, this is like one of my goals. Like when I started into this thing, is trying to figure out how to do exactly this. So yeah.
So,
how long did? Sorry, Chris,
go
go
ahead,
ahead.
Tim. No,
Well,
go
I
ahead.
just, how long did it take you to arrive at this, solution? I know you're not quite. Well, you're basically done with the solution part of it.
Yeah.
How long did it take you to do that?
So to get to where I'm at now, in terms of when I conceived the idea, was probably like 2004.
Oh wow!
So it's been a long time.
Wow, yeah. That's amazing.
But starting out in my 20s, it's not like I had any money to buy half of the stuff I've accumulated over the years. This is a lot of years of getting all of this stuff and trying things, and it's a lot of experimentation. Because I've never seen it done like this before.
Well, and also you're just saying that some of this technology hasn't existed before. So.
Exactly. That's the other thing too. And computers weren't as fast as they are now and powerful. And those are all huge factors in this. To be able to process all these channels in real time with effects and to make it sound like a record, but it's all live, is pretty amazing.
Yeah, that is really, really cool. It's really an exciting setup, man. It's very, very cool.
Yeah.
Two things. So one thing, just to get out of the way before I forget, is in the description box below the video, there's links to everybody's channel. You can check out Marshal's channel. You can see this rig in action in his live room, so doing performances for YouTube. That's really cool to check out, and the video work and all that kind of stuff is great. So a practical question about this, because you had mentioned, you're doing the live room stuff, but then also you're like, you're planning to do this out and to take this very complicated rig out. I was wondering, so when I first started playing live, I would show up with an amp, a guitar, and then I had the milk crate full of cables and pedals and stuff.
Yeah.
And then I would start digging in there and I'd put them out on the ground and I'd connect everything and the power supplies and like every single gig. And I was playing multiple times a week, and I was setting up this ridiculous stuff that took me as long as a drummer to set up. And
hey, easy now.
I eventually, got a little bit wise about it. And these are in the days that, pedal boards weren't as ubiquitous as they are now. Right. And so I, finally had an idea of like, hey, I need to get a piece of plywood and some zip ties and, carpet and Velcro and, do whatever I need to do I can just set something down and plug 3 things in and I'll be done. And so that all, in addition to saving a lot of time, it also saved a lot of confusion, because a guitar rig, especially what I was using, kind of a vintage styled stuff, was considerably more simple than what you're doing, but it also made like I'm not having to plug in all the different power supplies and mistakenly plug one into the wrong one and fry a pedal.
Right.
What do you see as being some of the ways that you're going to do that? You said you're going to consolidate some of the rig, so not every single thing that you're using here in the house will be used. But what other kind of things are you envisioning doing to make this setup more portable?
Well, in terms of portability, it's about optimizing the cable management, making sure things are labeled. That's what, I don't know if you saw, but things have little stickers with numbers on them. That correlates to a document that I'm keeping here, which is my live rig document here, and this tells me like what synth goes to what input. Let me move this over because you guys can't see that. What synth's going to what input here on the blue ARP, what cable number it is, the MIDI channels when it's going through, and some of the CC automation. So it's just going to be a lot of organization, writing things down. And in terms of streamlining this, I don't know yet. I don't know exactly what I'm going to do to make it better. One of the things I need to do is get actual cable lengths like pretty spot on, because right now there's stuff just spaghetti everywhere. So that's going to have to be figured out.
Like
But these
maybe
are
making
all
some cable snakes.
some snakes, maybe. Yeah, there's lots of options for that. And that's, I mean, again, these are all solvable issues. It's a matter of taking care of that, and then making sure you have things documented to where when you do arrive on site somewhere, you know exactly what goes where. Boom, you plug it in, and hopefully, fingers crossed.
Right. Do you have Marshall? Do you have like a sort of a general set time of when you want to play your first show?
No, I'm not going to put that kind of pressure on myself.
I'm not going to do it that way.
I mean, it's been like 20 years already, so
you're so close. You're so close. I mean, you've really got it. You've solved all the problems. You just kind of need to tweak it a little bit, and then
right. Well,
so I just wondered,
just a whole set of other issues in terms of actually moving this whole setup around. But that's something I intend to work on as well. So hopefully through this year, like I said, I don't want to give myself a time exactly, but hopefully by the end of this year, I've got a full set. I've got things figured out to where this thing can be moved, and maybe I do take the whole thing out. It's pretty impressive seeing all those synths and everything kind of going. So. It's one of those weird things where I remember like watching some of the videos of people playing live music like this, and it's, first of all, it's probably not live, but they stand up there, they got one synth in front of them, and I'm like, and it's making all this sound, and it's like not as cool,
That's so true. I think people are way more interested in seeing the individual devices and the different, where the sound is coming from and what instrument is creating that. That's why I think I'm sort of philosophically against, just having one of these little boxes and everything is happening from that, and you're just tweaking little things and pushing little buttons, and it's all coming from a tiny little box, man.
I mean, it's like at that point, why don't you just take the laptop and hit the space bar and then put your hands up?
I mean, it's kind of almost like that. So I don't dig it, and I think people love to see older synths and and just be able to check it out and go, oh wow, so yeah, that's probably the whatever making that sound, and that's cool. I just think it's visually cooler.
It's visually cooler, and it was extremely important to me to where there is actually a performance happening. Even though there was a lot of automation going on in the background for certain things, there's still a performance happening, and it's all live on a bunch of different pieces of hardware. So I think that's cool. And
yeah, well, I really don't think it's live unless you're doing a certain amount of that.
Right.
I think it's like you said, it's just like hitting the space bar at some point.
Right. It's like then you're kind of a DJ instead of
right.
You're not. And DJs, I guess, I don't want to get it crossed. DJs have a skill set that is hard to do as well. It's not easy to, seamlessly transition tracks and play good songs through an entire, set or whatever. But my goal was never to do that. I never wanted to be a DJ. I wanted to be able to figure out a way to do it all in real time. So
you wanted to be the creator of the music, not just somebody that's manipulating someone else's.
Yeah, exactly.
That's one of the things that I've noticed that you've always had with all this stuff going. You're always playing some part as well. It's not, everything's not pre-recorded or anything. It's you're adding and you're moving along with the music, and you're playing keys and doing that kind of thing.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a performance, Yeah.
Which, as you said, it's more interesting to watch. People want to see things happen.
Calfood says I need a flashlight headset. I do. That's to get those little bug eye things coming off.
Yeah. Or just go with a good old school coal miner's hat. Kind of take it.
With the yellow hard hat.
Yeah, exactly. Take it steampunk.
Well, and I was thinking they were saying, it might be complicated, the setup here. But then you think, remember Keith Emerson with his giant... I mean, that's got to be a million times harder to move around and repatch everything. And this is cake compared to that, And he did that on stage live.
so finicky too. Like they had to take a redundant rig, which I've seen actually. It's at Moog in Asheville, but I've seen that. Yeah, it's a redundant rig of that, all of that. It's amazing.
Like
Crazy.
Jean-Michel Jarre, where he's got he takes a whole room of synths with him and has 5 people to help him do it all. You can get pretty crazy with some of this stuff. So,
so they say. Oh my God.
So, what have been some of the biggest challenges in this setup? Like, what are some of the problems that you've had to overcome with getting this set up? So, if somebody that's watching is trying to build something similar to what you've built, what are the things that they're most likely going to encounter that will go wrong?
Well, lots of things go wrong. I've had issues. I should say the biggest problem for me hasn't been as much on the technical side. It's been more trying to figure out how do I do this and be comfortable while I'm doing it, because I could stand out there all day and work on stuff, but that's just really tedious. So I also, in addition to all this, I found a way to control it all remotely from here and do a lot of the composition side from my main studio with good monitors, so I can also hear what this is going to sound like, and so I get a good mix as well. That was a huge hurdle to clear as well. I would say that's probably one of the hardest things to accomplish. The other stuff is more just little stuff. It's you know that you can plug all this stuff into Ableton and do a bunch of stuff, but it's fine tuning it for specifically what you want to do with it. That can take a long time, So, and I didn't know exactly how this was all going to work, or if it was going to work how I thought, but it actually does, which is amazing to me.
You're proof of concept now. You've got it.
Mm-hmm.
That's what a beautiful moment that is, because that's where you wonder, what if it doesn't, and you're not sure really till you get there.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I'd love to hear about your rig there, Tim, and how you how your gear is connected and how you actually perform and how it all works out for you, because it's an entirely different, different animal you got going on there.
Yeah. Well, you and I have a lot of similarity in how we want to operate. In terms of, I want to be able to, really, it's important to me to be able to change up the arrangement and do it on the fly right when I want to do it in an improvisational kind of way. So, but I have 2 different rigs right now. I guess, can we take a look? I'll put them up. This first picture is, let me see, let me get back to that. That's actually just the entire studio. And on the left-hand side, including that Moog matriarch that's on the top of that little wing to the right there, is that's all just my studio rig. That's not going to go anywhere, hopefully ever. That's the concept for me, is that these are independent little stations. Mm-hmm. So that hopefully never goes anywhere. Directly at the very back of the room is my little synth solo rig that includes some Eurorack and Machine Plus being the brain of that, and it's its own little station there. And so in that I have I have a little submixer, a little 12-channel Yamaha submixer that all the sound sources are going into that, and then I'm submixing from there just down to 2, just to a left and right, which is connected into my audio interface. So I can't ever really, in other words, as soon as I start goofing with that, I already have to make it sound good in a 2-channel type of way, in a stereo kind of way. I'm sound designing as I'm writing, knowing that this is how it's going to end up. So that's just directly into a couple of channels of my audio interfaces. and so that makes things pretty easy. Then I have 2 channels open into Pro Tools, so if I want to record like a jam, I can, but it is just the 2 channels. I can't break it out from there, but that's on purpose. It's a limitation, so I can make sure I'm teaching myself how to get the sounds right, and how to make sure my mix is right, make sure everything's sounding great just in 2, because when I take it out, that's what the front of house guy is going to get. He's going to get a left and right. So I do a lot of this mixing and scaling before that. And then on the right hand side of that rig is, you can kind of see like a little semicircle on the right of the room. So that's my second live rig, which is dedicated to my band, the Penn Jones Conspiracy. So that rig is dedicated just to what I do in that band, which is, the band's a trio. There's a vocalist who plays a little bit of acoustic guitar here and there, and there's drums. And then there's me. So basically I'm covering bass and all kinds of chordal information, any kind of lead parts, and I'm doing some vocals as well. So I'm a busy guy when it comes to that setup. I'm really covering a lot of different things. And that I actually have just a little, in terms of how it's set up, Marshall, or in terms of like the routing of the audio, I have a little rack mount DI for that. And
what's a DI?
It's a direct injection. It's just like so it's taking the line level and putting it out in mic level. So even the front of house engineer, he's not going to have a box like that. He can just take mic cables right out of the front. I've got XLR outputs right on the front, and it's the 4 main outputs of that rig. So he can have a little bit of control, but for the most part, it's just going to be those 4 channels.
Would you say most of the venues you've been, is that what they use as XLR cables, or what do they prefer normally in front of house for your hookup to them?
I mean, they're going to want to do that. Yeah, they're going to want you to use XLR if possible.
Okay. No,
yeah.
So having a especially a power DI box like near your rig, it'll make it low impedance, and also it'll be able to drive longer cable lengths.
Exactly.
Using the
This is all good
balance
stuff.
will be lower
Yeah.
noise. So
I would have shown up with that one.
Yeah, it's good. That's good to know. It definitely will take it further, and it'll do it quieter.
Yeah.
Nice.
If you think about like it depends on what type of venue you're playing, because some venues are not very big. I mean, maybe even the size of your room there, where you got a whole bunch of people crammed in there. Yep. And the soundboard is like a little thing off to the side of the stage. In that case, like cable length doesn't really matter so much. But some venues you have to have a long run of stuff going back to the board.
Right.
Look at you, Tim.
So that's sort of the position I'm in, except for I'm standing, but I'm sitting in that one. But like, yeah, there's a little DI right on the front panel here, so they can just bring their mic cables and hook it up, and we're good to go. And and I'm running main stage, which I'm using some sounds, and like it'll access kind of whatever. So I'm using Omnisphere on a couple things, because I do have this Native Instruments S61 controller.
So I've always been curious about the main stage thing. I don't understand exactly what it does. So you can actually load in VSTs into that and perform with them, or sequence them?
Yeah.
It's
and that's
basically part of Logic that's just cut out. So if you imagine Logic without the recording feature to it, basically.
Okay.
So it is a lot like what has some similarities to what some of the functions you would use in Ableton. But yeah, it's like a mixer that you have access to all your plugins.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I can bring up a lot of the sounds from the record. If we used Omnisphere or something like that, I can go and find that patch and then just dump it into main stage and recreate that live. It will also accept some samples, and I'm not even exactly sure what all it is capable of. I tend to just use it as something that dictates program changes. So it has little sets and little patches and little songs, basically, and so I can just click on that and then roll through them as we go through the set and go through the songs, and then it's telling everything to change, which is pretty sweet.
A lot of touring keyboard players use like a MacBook with MainStage and a MIDI controller of some sort to run really complicated sets.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly kind of why I went with it. And of course, and MainStage is like very inexpensive, but it does what I need for this particular setup. This wouldn't cut it in the solo synth setting, but in my band setting, this works great. So yeah, I just needed to. I'm typically using that subsequent 37 on the left there as bass. I just love Moog bass sounds. They're just cool. And so I pretty much always rely on that for the bass tones, and so I keep it on my left because it's easier for me to play left-hand bass than right-hand bass. That's too weird for me. And then chord with my left hand. That's weird. So I don't know why, but it is. It was just more set up like a piano, where your left hand is probably going to be playing bass notes,
right.
And your right hand's playing chords. So I've just broken it out in that sort of a way so that it makes sense. And so yeah, I've plopped that OB6 up there now for this set of songs that we're taking out live, which is great because I did have just another MIDI controller up there. So I was relying more on MainStage. Now I decided, oh man, I'm taking another like analog out, man. That'll be cool.
Yeah.
So that's been fun. So a lot of sound design on that in the meantime, just to kind of get things going. But yeah, that's basically it. They're all MIDI'd to the MacBook Pro, and then I have a very simple audio interface for it, and then I run out of that audio interface and into that DI that I was telling you about, and then the OB6 is actually going right into the DI. So some things are just direct injected in there, and then there's a stereo pair that is everything that's happening inside of MainStage.
So you kind of doing a mix in MainStage and outputting that through the audio. The synths connect into the MIDI interface. You do some magic in MainStage, maybe with a couple plugins too, or whatever, and then output.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
Yep. Some compression and some beat sync delay and whatever else. All of that's happening inside of MainStage. So
yeah,
it's pretty cool. It's not as hip as Ableton by any stretch, but I'm not needing to do all of that much in the case of this particular setup. So
right, yeah.
And that's basically it. Right now I'm just taking the outputs, and you can't really see it, but kind of beyond where my left leg and left foot would be there's a Roland keyboard amp right there. So I'm plugging everything into that keyboard amp. It's all ending up mono just for now, just to monitor it, because I like to take that with me, because sometimes you can't get a good monitor mix. And if you're on a show with 3 other bands, and you're on, I've got to try to throw this kind of monstrosity. It's small, but it's still kind of a monstrosity. It's got to be thrown together, and it's got to work. And then I have to rely on the sound guy to understand that I am the guitar. I am the bass. I am the keyboard player. I'm all of that in this band, and they don't quite grasp that concept. So because of that, sometimes I think the front of house mix is probably not as great as it could be, and also my monitor mix can suck. And man, if I'm the only one creating, notes, basically, if I'm not in the monitors very good, we're all lost. Like the whole thing can shut down real fast. So I just started taking out an amp. So no matter what, because that DI I've got has a fold back, so it turns it right around and goes to the amp.
Yeah.
So that no matter what, I'm going to hear myself, and the band is going to hear myself, right? So like that's a real dangerous
I think that's
Cryss,
a smart thing to do because there's been a huge turnover in the last, I don't know, 5 years of guitarists, turning to like say Axe Effects or Helix or something, and just having direct rigs. Now the sound quality on these rigs have gotten to be really good, and a lot of people are liking the flexibility because you have multiple virtual amps and stuff. But the whole thing is exactly like what you said. Like I've had some really horrible soundmen that had to deal with, but every time I've played, I've always had my amp there that I could at least hear myself on stage and go, well, I don't know if anybody else is going to hear it or what it's going to sound like, but there's just that safety net, I feel like.
Yeah, you have to have it. And so Ben Jackson, our drummer, he's been taking out some canned sounds as well, playing some pads and triggering some samples, basically. And so we set him up with an amp too. So it's the very same thing. No matter what, if the house engineer has that stuff down and all of a sudden like a part of the song drops back to just, samples being played from pads, and if he doesn't have that in the monitors, the whole band doesn't fall apart, because at least we can hear him on stage no matter what. So it's just, it's like a fail-safe measure. It's kind of a pain because it's a 15-inch woofer that's in that Roland amp. It's it's kind of largish, and then plus 3 keyboards, and then the the laptop and the stands, and it kind of adds up. But what the hell? I mean, I'm a drummer by trade for the most part, and I'm so used to hauling stuff that it doesn't really even faze me. Like it's just like taking out a drum kit, man. Same thing. I've got a bunch of pieces, right? Okay, that's what I've done all my life. Here we go. Yeah. And then if I got a second still, I can talk about my solo rig here.
Before you do that, let me just say,
yeah.
See if Dan will take some out of voice cards out of a Prophet 10. I'm being volunteered for all sorts of stuff in the chat.
Put it back. You were little.
Oh.
Yeah, I want to see this. Oh, okay.
Well, it's not mine though, so just don't say anything. He wanted to expand his Prophet 5.
Just don't say anything. Oh my god. Okay, yeah. So here's the solo rig. I wanted to take a really different approach rather than having a lot of the way I'm creating things come from a keyboard specifically. I mean, there is one, but it's not like having 3 like that band rig I has. So I wanted to take a different approach to get different results, basically. So the only keyboard I have is the little KeyStep Pro keyboard there, and everything else is basically coming from Machine Plus or the Eurorack. And then you can see that 12-channel mixer is kind of down on a little stand in between those things. So everything gets submixed there and goes out to left and right. And I pretty much just set those levels and forget them, because in Machine Plus, much like how you're doing a lot of your mixing in the box with Ableton, Marshall, I'm able to set levels of anything that's generated from Machine there inside of it. Yeah, so I can set all the levels on a per pattern basis, basically, per scene.
Do they have, with your modular setup there, is that just like how many different outputs of that are plugging into your mixer?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, great question. Several. Well, and the way that I'm still kind of evolving this setup too, just like Marshall, like what you're up to, man. But like, basically, I have. In this version of it here, it's already changed again. But I have plates, and then I have the 2600 Tone Star. I'm just talking about like what's generating tones whatsoever. And then I have, that's got This one I have the Instruo Lubad, which is like a looper, tape style looper. So that can contain pre-recorded pieces. So let's see. Those
So
are
Are you using a mixer within your Eurorack? Like I've got what was it? The G Storm like 8-channel mixer on the corner of mine. Do you use something like that in the box, or are you just running wires straight out to the mixer?
I'm running wires straight out to the mixer. They only have to go like 2 feet, which is cool. So I got little 3-foot cables basically. So it's a pretty clean run. Clean for Eurorack. I mean, already it's a mess and there's wiring everywhere when you're rocking it. But it's pretty clean. But yeah, everything goes out of that. And then I have a couple of effects units. It's different now. I'm using Starlab for reverb, which is not pictured there. And but I am using Magneto, which is pictured there for delay. And so basically I'll just come out of like Platts and then go into Magneto for some kind of stereo spatialness and delay and whatnot, and then run out of that right into the mixer. And then and then kind of same with whatever. I'll go into Starlab with something, and then take stereo out of that. So it's taking mono sources and creating stereo imaging by the effects, quote unquote stereo images, using the effects.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Quick question from the peanut gallery here.
Oh yeah.
So you plug a machine in separate to your mixer, and then you've got your different modular components into the mixer. Is that how you're doing it?
Yes.
So
yes.
When how do you remember where your faders need to go for the levels? Because that would drive me insane.
Well, I'm setting them at unity gain, and the first 4 channels on that mixer have a built-in compression.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So I can kind of get more aggressive with how loud I turn things up, and know that there's basically a limiter at the top saying no further. You will not get louder. So, yeah. So that works pretty great. And the only other kind of interesting thing I did with Machine Plus was I connected an external audio interface so that I could span. It only has 2 outputs on Machine Plus. So, but if you connect an external audio interface, however many outputs that has, you can now assign.
Yeah, cool.
That's been really awesome, because I took I make one like the drums, and then one kind of more bass oriented, or bass and everything else even. And the reason I wanted to do it that way, I wanted to break the drums out separately because I love running them through DataBender to get those weird little variations as things are going along. It just crunches it. It glitches them. It does really cool things to it, and you can dial it in, and it's totally synced to the clock. So like whatever the tempo is, it's tempo synced, and it'll do things in time, and you can tell it kind of what the time division is that you would like for it to use. But like I love running a left and right drums image through that. So that's one of the reasons I got the audio interface, so I could pull drums out of that instead of, because with just the left and right, because drums are what I'm using Machine Plus for, primarily that, some bass, some pads, and then all the quirky stuff comes from Eurorack. That's kind of just my concept of how I thought would be the best way to utilize these pieces, and I wanted a really small footprint.
Yeah.
The last time I took out a solo synth rig, I took like half of my studio rig, and it was really fun, but it's outrageous. It's so much stuff. And at the end of the night, when we were all done, I was packing stuff up, and a stand got imbalanced as I took one of the other synths off, and my subsequent 37 just went bam right to the floor. And yeah. And because I'd taken out, I took out all my sweet gear, that's no, I don't want to do that again. So I did totally build this from scratch. And Marshall, just like you're saying, man, it takes a long time to, first off, conceptualize maybe the things that you think will work together well.
Right.
And then once you've kind of done that, throw them into Eurorack in particular, and then try to make that, trigger off of Machine Plus, basically using the KeyStep Pro. So the KeyStep Pro is kind of the middleman there, while Machine Plus is providing the time, basically. It then goes out via MIDI into the KeyStep Pro, which now can translate that, which is cool about the KeyStep Pro, very cool. It'll translate that into clock for Eurorack. So the KeyStep gets locked immediately, and then I come out of it, and then I can go into the clock that I have in the Eurorack there, which is Pamela's new workout. And from there, I can send clock to all the different devices. So it's fairly complex. It's not as wild as Marshall is what you've got going on. Like that's
insane. I think I have a mental condition.
I mean, I think you will have one. Dude, I mean, my hat is off to you with the. I mean, that's aggressive. Like I'm just looking at that thing, going, "Oh man," because I mean, I get this rig here. Has been nothing but like, nope, that's not working together. Nope. Now this is, now these three modules have just weirdly powered down. No, like I'm not getting, there was just so many little things, right? And you just don't know what those are going to be until you conceptualize the rig, throw it together, and then start trying to make music on it. And then you find out all the little quirks. So this has taken me probably, I don't know, 5 months, I guess, of messing with just this configuration to get it straight. But it does what I want, and so dig this. I can kind of do what you do, Marshall, which is I can make in Machine Plus, I can take various patterns and then assemble them into a scene, right?
Right, yeah.
And then a collection of scenes with different patterns and different configurations. And then I can launch those like clips, basically.
Yeah, and that's important because that's how you get the different dynamics and different sections of a composition to where you're not just playing the same 8 or 16 bar, 30, whatever, however long the loop is.
Yes. Yeah, so you can sit there and make those determinations on the fly, and that's where it gets exciting, because if something's just feeling good to you, you can just sit on it for a minute,
Yep.
And there's not.
I mean, I have sat here and out there too, and just played for no reason, just because it's fun. I just think it's fun.
Yeah.
Well, it's a blast.
Yeah.
When you have stuff set up well and you can get into the moment and kind of get into that flow state of it, then I mean that means it's set up well because you're able to really enjoy it without overthinking it.
So then another question for you, Tim, when you're conceptualizing like what you're gonna play in terms of the process of coming up with a composition with the setup, do you just sit there and just kind of noodle around and be like, oh yeah, I kind of like this, and then just kind of practice it, or like what's your approach that way?
Yeah, that's
kind of on a whim, or
this one's been a little different from how I would do it on my synth jams and my studio rig. So because of the Eurorack, there's a lot of parts that you're not necessarily in control of as you're goofing around. I mean, you're trying to go for a thing, and you're controlling them to an extent, but it also kind of has a little bit of a life of its own, to where you kind of go, oh wait, what it's doing right here is cool. That makes me think of something. Now that would be cool with maybe this part is cool with a weird tom groove or something, and then I just start building it out like that, and it might even start with a groove, from like a drum groove. I mean. So it kind of depends, I guess. I just kind of start messing with stuff, and if I have a patch idea about, I wonder what would happen if I plug, Lubod into da-da-da and use, use maths to, modulate the speed of it or whatever. And then if something cool starts happening, I just freeze and build out from there, basically. If that makes sense.
Do you ever put the delay after the reverb?
It's called gated reverb,
Oh, gotcha.
Only on his bass drum.
but only on the bass drum.
I love it.
Oh my god, that's so great. But hey, so the way that I can launch clips from Machine Plus, basically doing clip launches, essentially it's their scenes, whatever. The way that I can do that, and then I have usually about 2 or 3 sequences inside of the KeyStep Pro also, and that will do the same kind of thing. It has like 16 sequences, basically. Yeah, 16 sequences per like the whole bit, and it's 4-track. So I can sit there and do the same thing. I can have Machine Plus holding in one area, and I can start playing the clips out of the KeyStep Pro and start moving those around. And so I have 2 different scenes where I can do that, situations where I can do that and move things around and combine them in ways that are not locked in. It's not in stone, and I can sit there and like really come up with some cool combinations and go, oh wow, this works great together. I got to remember this move, hopefully.
Right. Well, that's what I was saying. I mean, do you kind of practice some of these performances?
That's a great question. I mean, parts of it I do, and parts of it I leave.
You
Because
let it kind of come organically.
Yeah.
In the moment.
Yes, absolutely. And
Cool.
so that even if I practice it a lot, I can play it 5 different times. How I kind of am trying to do it, it'll be different. It'll be 5 different versions. I mean, it really will. There'll be something about it that's just not quite the same, because it's hard to wrangle, especially Eurorack stuff. It's not necessarily going to get right back to where it was, and you're trying to reset knobs. There's no presets. You're
Right.
and after a song of twiddling on all the parameters, you're like, whoa, where was I? So even though, I do like have a general form in mind, I kind of stop after that so I don't torture myself. And also it's just more interesting, I think, just to let it kind of unfold organically.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the philosophy of that is so it's just really different than having 3 keyboard synths around me, because I'm going to play certain things. My hands are kind of going to do certain things, but if I make the Eurorack do it, it's different.
Yeah, it's something I wanted to ask you about as far as this particular rig, because with your DSI or your sequence, the subsequent, you get to know those, where stuff is. How much does your Eurorack modules move around in the case? Like, how much are you repositioning stuff and optimizing, or are you basically just leaving stuff there so that it becomes muscle memory?
Well, ultimately, I want to leave it there, but it's just been such a process of deciding what sounds good together, what plays friendly as well, what works together well. So there's been a lot of moving around of modules. Like, that picture is not the same as the way it exists back there right now at all. Like, because I just, you start missing certain things. You go for something and it's not there. So it's like, all right, what module isn't even getting used maybe in this patch? That's out of here, And then what I need is blah, blah, blah. So it's been a lot of experimentation with moving the modules around. However, I would like to land on it long enough to feel like it's its own instrument for a minute and get to know that. I think that's really important that you do that. If you're constantly moving things around, I just don't know how much you're going to really dig into what's there that you have and get everything out of it that's the potential of what it is,
Yeah, and I've kind of ran into that same thing where figuring out what synths do I want to use in my rig, what sounds good together, that's extremely important. And eventually you just kind of have to make a decision and say, this is what I'm going with. I'm not going to change it.
Yeah, and I think that's important to do, and just live with it for a while and make that a thing. I mean, eventually in 6 months or something, or whatever the time period is, you'll know it when you hit it, right? that you're kind of like, all right, I sort of feel like I've gotten everything out of this configuration that I can think of. Well, now let me, inject some new blood into it and see what happens. But
Yeah.
I would not want to change it out like weekly. That would drive me absolutely nuts. I want to. It would. I mean, that's just. I do want some muscle memory about what's going on. I do want to know what's there and how things sound together, and make sure that I've explored that fully before moving on. And I got to admit, I've been pretty guilty this past year because of not having a lot of time to create music for most of the year. I continued to buy gear, and so now I have a lot of gear that I don't know. I'm not utilizing it. I don't know how to get to the bottom of it yet. Whereas before, I'd buy a piece of gear and I'd just dive right into it and just like really learn it and get a feel for what it would do. This year, because I kind of wanted some form of momentum, rather because I wasn't able to keep creating, I thought, well, I'll just buy some new modules and that'll at least make me sort of feel like I'm moving ahead still. I was having a little problem with that.
Yeah, I think it's a little easier with drums and with guitar and bass in that regard, that you can swap stuff out and it's not a big deal at all. There's not a lot of complexity to it. A drum is a drum, and changing pedals or amps or whatever. But you spend 20 minutes with it and you basically got it. And so I do find that too with synthesizers. Like, they take a little more finesse, a little more time to spend with them to explore all the nooks and crannies of that. And for that reason, like, I slowed down in the last half of the year, slowed down synth type stuff. And although I did buy 2 basses and a guitar, like, again, like the amount of time that went into learning them, it's another strat. I've had, dozens of strats, so that's not a big deal. Bass, not a big deal. Like, I just tweaked them out. Set the pickup height, change the pickup, set up the neck or whatever. Like, but even if I didn't do that, there's nothing to do really. It's like I just get to start using it and making music with it. Like, oh, this will sound cool for that. But yeah, when you start monkeying around with Eurorack or something, then it's like, or more complex synthesizers, then yeah, I think that's really the time to slow down and go, okay, if I really want to get the most out of this, and one of the synthesizers that really, I mean, I knew this as a concept, and I knew it from my other music rigs, but like one little synthesizer that I just really spent a lot of time to get to know was the Micro Freak, Arturia Micro Freak, and it's small, but it's got a surprising amount of little stuff on there, and to spend time going through each of those engines and making patches and the sound set and that kind of stuff, that was really a good experience to get the most out of that. Now I feel like if I go grab it off the shelf and use it, it's like, all right, I know what this does. I can get to it right away. Versus, say, like the Hydrosynth, where I have spent some time with it, but not enough. And that's one that I really want to spend a lot more time, because there's so many things you can do, and I have to say the Hydrosynth has gotten me to slow down as far as the synth stuff goes, because I go, man, there's still much more I want to do with that right now, that I shouldn't really buy anything else. I want to buy more stuff, but I'm gonna hold off, because if I get free time comes to me to really dive into one synthesizer, well, then I want to go and spend a bunch of time with that, which is good. It's a good thing.
No, yeah, I agree. That's
Totally.
I've run into the problem where, yeah, like I buy a lot of stuff, and then I don't really sit down and focus on learning it intently, like knowing all the little details. Just certain instruments I've had for a long time that I know really well. But there's other ones that have come up that are a little, I haven't spent as much time with them, and sometimes I feel guilty, but then I'm like, it's fine, I'll get to it eventually, But then there's also the situation where I'll have a synth like the Radius. Korg Radius I haven't used in years, and when I decided to swap out the 2600 for that, I had to like go back, pull the manual, remember how to use this synthesizer that I've had forever, that I used to know really well, because it was one of the first it was one of the first like really expensive instruments I bought, even though I had sold it and I bought another one, because it's a great little synth. But yeah, there's also that problem. So if you go away from the Micro Freak, for example, for a few years, you might come back to it and be like, oh man, how did I do? I have to go pull the manual again.
Yeah, but at least you still have had that experience, so to get back into it will be faster the second time.
Yeah.
Like again, that in that regard, guitars are very easy because I've got some that I put away for 6 months. I'm just not going to touch these guitars. And then when I rotate them around, pull 3 and pull another 3 out, then it's like, well, yeah, I love this guitar and it's fun because it's new again. But yeah, with the synthesizers, it can be a little bit hard. But yeah, I think that can open some new creative avenues because it feels fresh when you bring it out. So I don't mind having something that I'll come back to and kind of catch up with at a later time. So and yeah, I agree, Marshall. Like there are some times where opportunity presents itself, and you're like, I'm just going to buy this because at some point down the road, I think this is going to be really important to me.
Yeah.
And really, the Hydrasynth was like that for me because I was like, I like what it does. I want to dig into this a lot more. But I knew, like, at the time that I got it, that I didn't have a lot of time for it at that moment. So It was always intended to me like, okay, as soon as I kind of break free from the stuff that I'm doing, then that's where I'm going to dig in. And so, like you said, like, you grab something and come to it a little bit later.
Yeah, and that's totally fine.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, you don't have to know everything inside and out. If it's doing what you need it to, what you want it to at the moment, like sometimes that's good enough too,
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I just found I was just kind of guilty of not getting a chance to know some stuff, and then finding now I'm kind of behind the curve. Like now I feel like I just need to sit around and just goof with so much stuff. Like, but I don't want to do that because I have music to learn, and I want to create. And I want to create. So I got records to make still.
That's exactly what's happened to me with a lot of with a lot of this stuff. Is like I've got a goal in mind that I'm trying to complete. So I don't have. I will occasionally sit down and noodle on something, but like most of the time these days when I'm working on stuff, it's in there, and I'm trying to get that 20-year idea of mine completed, and it's
Well, we're fortunate that so much is available to us right now, and a lot of it is, some things are going up and are very expensive. Other things are very inexpensive, and there's some synthesizers that I have purchased that I love that classic sound. I don't really care about diving into that one so much. So the Moog One,
right.
that's the thing that I own. That I know, and I have searched it out and have made my sounds and all that. But then there's other things that I love also that I go, I just don't really care right now to do anything with this, like the Roland Cloud D50. Love the sound of the D50. Don't have any desire to program one right now. So
it's a bear too.
Yeah.
That's one of the synths that I spent a lot of time figuring out when I got the Boutique.
Yeah.
And it's not a fun synth to program on, so I don't blame.
But it's got some classic sounds that you want to just visit occasionally from time to time, or that will just add a little spice to a track. And that 4-song demo, there was some on the kind of synth pop last track that I did that I sprinkled in some D50 and DX7 sounds in there. I didn't need to program those up from scratch. I needed to go for classic sounds that are already done, and it worked perfectly. Yet other song parts were, done from scratch. So it's nice to be able to have those options, and not everything has to be that. But I get you on that, Tim. Though, it's a good feeling to come at it sometimes and go, the way to happiness is not necessarily the new piece of gear. I've got some stuff that I want to dig into. And when you start thinking about that, I've been meaning to do that, meaning to dive into that one, that can be a really good feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, a great feeling for sure. Yeah, I want to feel like I'm utilizing the gear that I have, because I do have quite a bit, and I'm super fortunate to have what I have, and that it's the time of the world that it is, that there's so much cool gear to be able to create music with. I just want to make sure I'm doing that and utilizing it.
Yeah.
That's one of the best parts of being around today is you got all this great stuff that's come over the years, and then there's even more new stuff. Like that Osmos, I pre-ordered one in 2019. I cannot wait to get a hold of that thing. I've seen some of the demos that people have been doing.
Yeah.
They've finally been shipping, and holy crap, I cannot wait to get that thing.
That thing looks pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we've kind of come to the end of this, and it was really a fantastic look at your guys' rigs, and maybe at some point we'll have on a couple guitar players and guitar rigs at some point.
It would be cool to understand some of those pedal boards and how those are all configured and what they do. Like, that's something I don't know anything about. I'd love to learn more about that.
I think that's I think that's a great idea. We should do like a guitar rig, show for sure. Talk about the guitar, your pedal board, and amp combos.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's just see if my buddy Arlo wants to come on too, because I think he would be interested in doing that. He's had a lot of live experience playing also, so that would be kind of fun to do that. So yeah, we'll start looking into that.
Yeah.
But anything else, you guys, before we go?
God, I mean,
Party on.
Yeah, party on, Garth. I'm not really too much on my end. I mean, I've got my next little bit of time all, sculpted out for me, and it's just going to be heading towards this show with the band next week. So that's, my head's going to be down and just doing that.
Awesome. Well then, if you guys would, in the chat, and if you're watching it on the playback and stuff, hey, give it a thumbs up, and love when people are leaving comments. If you come and watch it, in a couple of days or whatever, let us know, like even just to pop in and say hi. It's really appreciated. We check out all the comments, and thanks for everybody hanging out with us in the chat. Like this is something that we look forward to every week. What were you saying, Marshall?
Oh, I was going to ask if any of you guys have some live rigs or whatever you want to share. Leave some links in the comments so that we can check out your guys' setups. I'd love to see what other people are doing as well.
Yeah, me too. Thanks for bringing that up as well.
We should have a thread, like maybe you want to start a thread on that in the Facebook group also, so that we could kind of have a show and tell. That would be cool.
Yeah.
Yes, very much so. Cool, guys.
Until next week, we'll see you same bat time, same bat channel.